Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Hi, Alyssa. Good morning. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneur Show. Thank you so much for taking time out to be here with me today on this show.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure, Alyssa. Alyssa, I'd like to start off by asking you, this question. I was reading about you on your website, AmericanConfidenceInstitute.com. That's where I found a little bit about yourself, your family. It says, one of the important events in your life is 2008, when your son was diagnosed with this lifelong neurological disability, which predicted to leave him a certain way. But, you refused to accept that. And then, you did something. Can you, that's what I'd like to start from, but you can, feel free to start off from wherever you like.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Jag. Yeah, it was definitely a kick in my confidence as well as just my overall life. And I think it's a really good theme. When we talk about entrepreneurship, I think it might be a genetic quality that many of us can relate to, that we are entrepreneurial. And there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and entrepreneurial. You can be entrepreneurial in a corporate job, right? And I was being entrepreneurial for my first part of my career, 20 years. I was a marketing product management person and became a chief marketing officer. And I did everything I was supposed to do. Yeah, and I, again, loaded words there, but being entrepreneurial, but finding a lot of frustration. And so I had really had this interest of motivational science. It was something that I was applying in my career. So all these things were going on. It was like kind of the Big Bang Theory for me in a lot of ways, where all of a sudden, when my son was diagnosed with this neurological crisis, two things happened. And I don't wish this on anyone, but I think as often happens, you look back and you go, thank goodness, right? First, I said, I have to help my son. I have to do something about this. I can't live with myself if I don't do something. And what the do something was, is he was diagnosed with a neurological disease condition that, after going to doctors all over the world, I realized they didn't have the answers. They would look me in the eye. I could see they had no clue what was going on. I was getting different information, so on and so forth. So the entrepreneur in me was like, I'll figure it out, right? The second piece of it was almost an excuse, quite frankly, to pivot. And I needed that push out, that justification, and say, yes, you're the breadwinner, but you also have a life to live. And so as I was studying this, I don't think it was a conscious thing at the time, Jag. I don't think I was like, I'm going to make a business about it. But I was looking for something that would give me more purpose, more association. And this was like a red carpet, like, let's do this. What happened after that many years later was the formation of a business around it, and everything else that followed. And, at the time, I can't tell you that I was thinking I was going to get rich doing it. But as we'll unwind the story, it really turned into not only a great success for myself and my son, but a business success.
Great. Could you dive a little deeper into, you did some research which overlapped, the Western techniques and the Eastern techniques, and then, you did a whole lot of validation before it, turned out a business. But even before that, you solved a certain personal problem. Could you, try and share as much as possible about what the crux of it was all about?
All right. Well, so the condition is called dystonia, and I start there because so many people listening probably will have this epiphany that a dystonia, any kind of dystonia, definitionally is where there's a disconnect between your brain and what your brain is telling your body to do, and your body doesn't receive the full instruction or the instruction at all. So Parkinson's and MS and Tourette's, those are all forms of dystonia. My son has something called focal dystonia, which means between his brain and his arms, in his case, there's disconnect. So before I reach for my coffee cup and I take a sip, I can do this. I don't think twice about it. My son can't. And, he would pick it up and his arms would shake all over. And when we discovered this when he was very young, 2008, he was about 10 years old, 8 years old. It was that moment of, he can't write, he can't hold a pencil, he can't, he couldn't do things, he couldn't do things in school that young kids were expected to do. So it was really a social concern as well as a physical concern, right? What became very apparent to me as I was visiting neurologists and all kinds of doctors, acclaimed doctors, they'd have their degrees on the walls behind them, very intimidating, and I live in Boston. We have some of the top hospitals and practitioners in the world here, right? So you get very intimidated. You think, well, whatever they're telling you must be the truth. And I could just see it in their eyes. They didn't have that confident conveyance. And I would ask questions and I get these kind of dodgy answers. In fact, you get inconsistent answers from one to the other. So it was very clear to me that they didn't really have answers. We took the course of all the medication that they recommended. We took all the course of all the injections. We followed it and nothing was working and it was torturing my son. And I was emotionally falling apart, thinking to myself, what am I doing to my child? It was so traumatic for both of us. So again, it was that moment of, you got to do something. You just have to do something. And, at the time, brain science, that phrase didn't really exist. People didn't talk about brain science like we do today. So I was venturing into all kinds of spaces, acupuncture, meditation, all kinds of alternative therapies, movement therapies, flotation therapies, you name it. I was just trying to understand what's out there. Why do people think they work? And what started to come together was a very clear understanding of the connection between mind and body at a physiological level, not spiritual, not, literally a physiological level. And I was very brave, to be honest with you, Jag. And I think it's because maternal motivation is the ultimate. You can be an entrepreneur, but there's nothing like, when you see your child in distress, right? So I was reading dissertations and research studies, and I was calling up doctors all over the world. And the beautiful spiritual part of the story is that there was a doctor who had written a book on dystonia. He was based in Spain at the time. And I tried to read the book. And at the time, it was early in my journey. I didn't really understand what he was writing. English was a little tough, but the concepts were very heavy. He's a medical doctor. So I dabbled in it. It was a download PDF too, in full confession. Like, I'm still a paperback kind of girl, right? So I gave up on it pretty easily. And after 2, 3, 4 years of dealing with these traditional doctors and then also learning about alternative methods, I was trying a whole lot of things. What happened is there's a woman who was based in Canada, and she had found one of my books that I had written, loved the book, had nothing to do with anything related to my son, Zach. But she started kind of befriending me and saying, we need to do something with this book. Let's do something together with this book. And she was working in the human resource space and sports psychology space. And she calls me up one day and she says, there's a laboratory here. I want you to come up and I want you to check it out. They're doing some really interesting work using technology. They're doing some interesting things with athletes. And I said, okay, well, Boston, Toronto is about an hour flight, right? So I said to Lynette, I said, I'll plan to come up. And she says, bring Zach, your son, because Zach happened to really love playing tennis. And she's like, it'd probably be fun for him. She'll meet some cool athletes. I said, okay. So we booked a ticket to go to Toronto. It was, I think it was November when we had the conversation. The trip was in February when Zach was going to be on vacation. And a week before we go to get on the plane, I get an email. And this is like 4 or 5 years later from the time I had downloaded that Spanish book. And it was from that same author. And he was sending an email. And I was like, why is this guy, 5 years later, whatever. And I was like, I'm going to go try and read that book again. And I opened the PDF and I go, oh, God, I understand this now, right? I was 5 years, 6 years more knowledgeable. And he was writing about this concept called neuroplasticity, which then I really understood, right?
Right.
Mind body
Right.
connection. And so I go back to the email and I was going to write him a note. And I realized that the note was to announce that he had relocated. So anyone who was interested in his work and wanted to get treatment, and where the spiritual surprise is that the email said that he had moved from Spain to Toronto.
Wow, I was expecting that.
So we went to go visit him. And here was a medical doctor that was practicing what today would be considered traditional medicine, but in the time, right?
Right.
And, really kind of on the spot watched Zach do things he had never done. And it really, I won't say it cured him because that's a whole different conversation, but it really helped him.
Right.
Zach today is a tennis pro while he finishes his
Wow.
master's degree in school psychology. So, he is really an amazing human. A lot of it having to do with that Toronto visit, because it gave him the confidence to know what's possible, but also to know that, there is a mind-body connection. So
Yes.
beautiful things happened. Lynette and I started American Confidence Institute. It kind of was the gateway to a lot of things. But what it really taught me in hindsight is not only to have that persistence and belligerence, but science will catch up sometimes later, right? And today, that same doctor, we had him come to Boston. He spoke at the Harvard Medical School, and everything that we were kind of pioneering at the time now is considered completely and utterly, normal and, part of the traditional medicinal sense. I think, probably from your background, that people have been doing acupuncture, meditation, mindfulness for thousands of years. I keep saying if it didn't work, it wouldn't still be here. And now we just have the science to prove that it does.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for sharing this story. Alyssa, you spoke about, your discovery of neuroplasticity and, how it helped your son so far. And then you also mentioned about the American Confidence Institute. So can you talk about how you went on to start this? So when did you finally decide, okay, you know what, this is working for my son, but how did it get translated into something else differently? Because there we are in a medical condition, but here you're applying it to people all over in a everyday life. So how did that happen?
Well, it's a beautiful question, Jack, because oftentimes we have these great ideas or what we believe is a great idea. And people will naysay. They'll be like, how are you going to make money doing that? That's crazy, right? Like all these phrases that you get that almost actually accelerate your urgency to do it, right? I'm going to prove them all wrong, right? That is the entrepreneur in us. So that's the genetic trait, right? So a little bit of it was that, like, how can you make money doing this? What do you, how is this going to manifest into an actual business? And it was a little bit of that. Part of it, though, was that I knew that the concept and understanding the brain, I could apply to how to help people understand how confidence works, how to control their brains better. So that became the pathway to training people in the business world, right? Corporate and entrepreneurs. I do a lot of work at the Wharton School and applying it to how to pitch better, right? So when you understand what people's motivations are, and again, using the brain science. So that became kind of the pathway. There was also in the back of my head this idea that if we can quantify how to achieve confidence and how to not look at it as something you're just born with or you're lucky to get, but really teach people how to do it. Not only could we bring that through training and assessments and apps and all kinds of other vehicles, but it was a brand. It was something that we could become known for. And I'll confess to you now, it was very lofty at the time, right? Like crazy lofty. I had a meeting. Well, let me back up. I got an email out of the blue, and I don't remember how many years ago now. It was probably 5 or 6 at least, from a digital manager at the L'Oreal company, right? And L'Oreal being one of the biggest brands,
Yeah.
they own like 90 different sub brands. It's enormous, right? And he was a digital manager for one of the brands. And he said, really interested in your confidence work. And as we all do when we run our own business, you get somebody who's interested, woohoo, right? Like it's happy dance, right? So it was a young man, which I thought was even more interesting in some cases. So I invited him, and he wound up bringing his vice president with him to see me present in New Jersey for a group of people that had nothing to do with their industries, but it was just close geographically to their office. So I was like, come see me present, we'll meet, whatever. We had a nice meeting. We kind of left there with not a specific to do, but I thought in my head, that's the brand. It's brand. It's all about the brand. So fast forward, we stayed in touch. I would drop them an email, check in. Once in a while, they'd send me a research report and be like, hey, this is interesting. Thought you like it, or what your input, but nothing official. And 2 years ago now, I'm trying to think. About 2 years ago, called me up again and said, we want to do something going forward. And, here we are. I have a contract. I have the proof. It says, I am their spokesperson and their confidence educator. So, part of it was maybe manifested. Again, we'll dance on this line together today: spiritual, business, right? Passion, desire, all of that manifesting. But it's real money. It's amazing work, right? I get to go to New York and be literally a rock star, makeup artist and my own jewelry people. It's crazy. It's really fun. But at the same time, it's a fundamental belief that the work that we do really does help people to be more confident.
Alyssa, I'm going to go back a little bit, because we've spoken so much about, you've uttered the word confidence many times. Before we go ahead and talk about it anymore, can you, in your experience, explain to me and the listeners as well, what is confidence and what is not confidence? I think the more I think about it, I can now tell you, if you ask me to define confidence, I would struggle to use words. I know how it feels, but I really don't know how do I define it. So can you tell me, what is it and what is it not?
Oh, Jag, you got another 3-hour podcast coming up, because here we go. Well, in a nutshell, and I'm going to be very literal, okay? Confidence is not actually a feeling, and it's not something that you are a little confident or not. It's very absolute in definition. Now, if you're a scientist or you're a researcher, or you remember high school chemistry, you remember the idea of a confidence, maybe an interval where you say, I'm confident enough to believe that this thing is true. So if you're trying to prove a theory or create some kind of a data set that justifies a decision, you say, there's maybe a 10 or 20% tail on either side that I'm wrong, but I'm confident enough to say that this is true. All right. So start with that as you're like, okay, we get that. When you look at it at a neuroscience, at a brain science perspective, we turn the definition to say, well, what are we confident about when we talk about ourselves? And confidence actually, again, brain science wise, is a decision about the truth of something. And in the case of ourselves, if we're acting according to our values. So you are confident with the way you act, the way you react, or the way you interact with other people, other things, that says, I'm choosing to do this. I'm deciding to do whatever it is because I think I've decided in reality that is something I believe in and I want to do. It's according to my values. So very academic. I'm going to give you a more practical definition to operate in.
Right.
If I said to you, do you want coffee or tea? You might like both, but at a given moment in a given day, you're going to say one or the other, right?
Right.
There's a whole bunch of things that go on in your brain, a whole bunch of pieces of data. Maybe how much caffeine have I had? Did I have coffee today? Tea? What is she going to think of me if I pick one? All these data points. Now, in some cases, you may even pull in memories or current smells, maybe or the weather. Certain weather, you might drink dip, right? So you have all these data points internally, externally, past, present, coming together in your head, and your head's doing all that correlation. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the moment, at the end of the millisecond, really, it's saying to your brain, I really feel like tea. So you say, I would like tea. Now, are you confident that you want tea in that moment in time, given that set of information? Yes, you are confident, right? So we make confident decisions all day long. It's when we face a decision that we go, not really sure. Don't have enough data, not really sure what's important to me at the moment. And again, I'll use this silly decision. At the end of the day, when we're very tired, does this happen to you, Jag? It happens to me. My husband comes in the room. He's like, what do you want for dinner? I'm like, I don't know. I don't care. Right? I don't care. Why? Because I don't have the data. I don't have the wherewithal to make that decision. So there's no confidence behind my answer, right? I don't care, whatever you want is fine. I'm confident that I don't really care. That's about it. So if you look at the core of all that, it is, if there's something I really value, need, or want, and I'm clear about that, I will make a decision in alignment with that. That's when I am confident. That's when I act and think with confidence. I often say to people too, there's no halfway. You're either confident or you're not.
Right.
And that changes also the way I think people think about confidence. It's very binary, right? Sort of, you feel confident? What does that mean? It means I am or I'm not. Did I totally confuse you, or is that clear as crystal?
No. It's clear. It's clear so much so that I'm now starting to realize I've had it all wrong all along. I think this feeling that I was talking about wasn't confidence. Then I need to go figure out what it is. But
yeah. Well, it's the feeling as a result of the way you think. So I have all the books here because I didn't know what we need. I'm going to flash all of them because, when you have a bad habit like I do, it gets very, but the book, not my last one, but the one before that is called Confidence is a Choice.
Right.
And I labeled it very deliberately because it is a choice. And we often forget we get to make those choices. And it's those moments where you surrender your choice, where you say, either I'm making a choice that doesn't feel right, that's not aligned with my values, not confident, or I'm not making the choice at all because I'm afraid to, or I don't want to for whatever reason. I don't make the choice. And again, that's a lack of confidence. So confidence is really not how you think. It's not what you think or how you feel, it's how you think. And that choice, that ability to say, time out, I'm going to decide what I want for dinner. I absolutely want tea. That is the confidence that comes through into your behavior and your action.
Got it, Alyssa. The first thing that came to my mind when we were talking about this, right? So you clearly, this is how I would interpret, or this is how I understood what confidence is. Confidence is about being true in the moment. As long as you're true to the moment, no matter what it is. If you're not clear, you're not clear. You're confidently not clear. But would I be wrong if I say absence of fear is confidence?
No.
Yeah.
Absence of fear is not. So fear is a trigger in our brain that makes us question. It creates a signal that we have to make a decision. Okay. So an incoming fear, whether it's a physical fear or an emotional fear, our brain also wakes up, specifically the amygdala in our brain wakes up and says, hey, danger, you got to make a decision here.
Right.
So fear itself is very positive in that way, if you recognize it as a signal, right?
Right.
So being scared of something doesn't mean you're not confident. Look, I'm scared of a lot of things, but I often am confident. Even the story I told you, I'm like, who am I to read a dissertation on neuroscience? Like, I'm not a doctor, right? But you overcome fear in a way that says, I need to do this for my son, right? Or I need to write a book, or I need to start a business because I need to do this for myself, right? You overcome that fear. So it can be actually a fuel to your confidence if you see it that way. The opposite of confidence is not what you probably think. I'll give you 30 seconds to think hard. Listeners, think about this too. The opposite of confidence, and I'm going to give you a clue. The opposite of confidence is not insecurity either.
Can I take a guess? Is opposite of confidence confusion?
No, because again, confusion can be a signal that says, hey, Jack, you need to get more
right. You need to
information
arrive at
before you make
clarity.
that decision, right? Or settle down, go take a walk and come back when you're clear, right? So you use those fear, confusion and fear are kind of in the same boat, right?
Right,
They're
right,
signals.
right.
The opposite is guilt. Because when
Wow, I
you
would have
do
never
something,
guessed that.
nobody does, right? But think about it this way. You go to someplace, maybe with friends, family, and you're doing something, and all of a sudden something comes out of your mouth, or you do something, and you're like, oh, right? Again, you have a decision opportunity here. I can either apologize or own up to it, or I can go wallow in my own shame, right? Brene Brown talks a lot about shame. Shame and guilt are very related. But the idea that you did not act according to your values creates that guilt, right? That
Guilt.
regret. So
Right.
the killers of confidence is when you take a fear, and a fear of failure, regret, or rejection, which is the big one, that people aren't going to like you, and you do something as a result of that fear that does not align with your values. That's where we wallow in the shame and
Right,
regret.
right, right.
And that
This is
is the opposite. Because you know what? You can screw up. I screw up all the time. I'm the first. I talk about in my own podcast, all the screw ups, right? But the difference is when you screw up and you say either I learned something from it, and or I'm going to own up and apologize or deal with that or take that as a way of figuring out how to do it better next time. That's confidence.
right,
It's
right.
when I wallow in it, when I berate myself, when I feel crappy about it, when I get depressed over it. That's the opposite, right?
Great. Thank you. Now that you've told, about, guilt being the opposite of confidence, it kind of feels like, oh yeah, it feels so obvious now. But I wouldn't have guessed it before you said it, because it's what is behind the words, right? The way we break it down. Great. I've just got two quick questions. Now, confidence, how do people be confident at the moment of experiencing stage fear?
Well, that's a very big question with a lot of different ways to answer. So I'm going to give you a short answer, right? The first and foremost is to recognize that signal, right? So anytime your amygdala is being challenged, you can actually feel it. And what I mean
Right,
by that is, my Lynette, who I met before, she said she called it the itchy feeling. It's that feeling where you're like, this doesn't feel right, or you want to crawl under your desk, or there's that reactive, like, oh, I don't want to do this, or I just did something that right? Call it whatever you want to call it. But that moment is that moment your amygdala is saying decision time. And when
right,
you face the decision consciously, when you say to yourself, I'm going to make a choice, and I'm going to give you a very real example for right this minute, because it just happened to me before our call. My, dare I say, 40th high school reunion is this weekend, Saturday.
okay.
I live in Boston. It's down in Long Island. It's at least a 4-hour drive, right? Beautiful weather, finally in New England. I don't really want to leave it. I don't want to miss a pool day, right? The whole bit. And I looked at the list. I'm like, there's nobody there that I really, was friends with then, friends with now, and all this. So I'm like, I'm not going. I'm not going. Another friend, I put on the thing, not attending. Another friend calls me, what do you mean you're not going? It only happens once every 4 years. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to go. I'm not interested. Right? Conscious decision, thinking, am I going to regret this? Right? Very simple exam, using simple examples. It can be very complex examples. Of course, should I take the job? Should I marry this person? Should
Right,
I, right, do this career? But if you take those moments of doubt or fear that people aren't going to like you, that you might fail at something, and you're like scared, that fear, and you go, okay, what am I really scared about? What am I really fearing? When you boil it down to that, we have a methodology, a coaching methodology at the Institute. It's been sanctioned by the top coaching federations and the HR. People love this methodology, and it's very simple, Jag. It asks you to say, what are you really afraid of? And if you're really authentic and honest with yourself in that moment, you go, I don't really care if they don't like me. Like, I haven't seen these people in 40 years. What do I care?
yeah,
Right? Now, does it get easier as the older you get? That's another thing about confidence that most people don't realize. We don't get to be fully confident as a human race until we're 60, because it takes us 60 years, 60, to finally realize, you know what, nobody's noticing. Nobody cares that you're not there in
Right.
reality, right?
Right.
It's your own fear that, you're going to fail or somebody's not going to like you. So if you can get over that and look at it in the eyes and recognize that's what's causing that itchiness, that's the essential secret.
Thank you. Thank you, Alyssa. The second question that I had in my mind was, to ask on behalf of people, what you're sharing to the world, what you're contributing to the world is, it's difficult to sell, it's difficult to convince people, some people just can't recognize this as a tangible thing, right? This is an intangible thing. Now, there are a lot of intangibles that are being offered to people by a lot of subject matter experts. Yours is confidence, and there are a lot of other. How do you quantify this whole thing? Like, say, for example, if L'Oreal is a company that's come to you now, two things. One is they are not really bothered about their outcome because they know it's going to help them somehow. And but there are people who would want absolutes, right? So how do you deal with these people? So what are your metrics of the process of this?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate this. I'm very careful with, this is not woo-woo science. This is not this kind of esoteric, promise people the universe. And the coaching methodology is just one example where if you come to me and say, I'm not a confident person, I can't help you. That's a whole different conversation, but it's more, I'm not confident about what specifically. So there are some pretty standard scenarios. Not confident giving a presentation, not confident running a meeting, not confident speaking up in a meeting. And most of it's business oriented because that's really our target space. Not confident at making a decision about a career choice, right? So very specific. And when you get specific about things, then you can identify, again, that fear for that specific situation, and you can resolve it. And the methodology, again, it's very 15 minutes done, in and out, right? How that is packaged and sold to companies or sold to individuals, we teach it in classes. So we teach that methodology, we teach the brain science around it. We have a coaching certification program. People pay to be certified coaches. They then can use it with their clients. We come into organizations. I do a lot of keynotes. It's part of the motivate. It's a amazing skill to have. It doesn't matter if you're a manager or a leader or not, just as a parent, as a friend, as a citizen, right? So we teach people how to use it in that construct. So that became kind of the core of our offering, if you will. What happened from that, and hope you don't mind, I want to pivot a little bit, not so much away from confidence, but back into the entrepreneurial conversation. Right. Because I think this is really important for anyone who is an entrepreneur or thinking about being an entrepreneur. Again, you have this idea, it could be off, crazy, off the beaten path kind of idea, and people are going to naysay it in, of course, testing. And now when I started American Confidence Institute, I was running my own consulting business. I had a plan that I was going to go like 70-30 and then shift it over time. And I did that, right? So I wasn't 100% into the confidence stuff. I was testing, trying things, really trying to figure out how to sell it. And where I kept coming back and I was stuck for a really long time. Again, knowing that it came out of the marketing discipline, shame on me, but was that you can't sell something to everyone. That messaging, that positioning never works. And today, never works. And what I mean by that is everyone could use confidence, right? So I was like, well, I can speak to a group of engineers. I can speak to a group of stay-at-home moms. It was pervasive. And that was good for the idea that I could keynote anywhere. The problem is you can't market to everyone. You don't have the money or time. It doesn't matter how big you are. And they look at that and they go, it's really for anyone. It's not for me. It's not as exciting as somebody coming in and saying, I'm going to give you engineering confidence if you're an engineer, or stay-at-home mom confidence if you're, right? And you can't have 4,000 talks. You can have examples of them, but it's not targeted, right?
Right.
So it bothered me, and I knew it was hampering the business. And this was before L'Oreal came into the picture, that's just a different, that was my unicorn, if you will. It was just magical. So what happened is I kept getting asked to come speak to employee resource groups. And these are the groups within organizations, not just for-profit companies, but nonprofits, academics, government. They all have employee groups. And I kept getting, it was a very big market for the confidence work, relatively speaking. And I kept saying, why? Like, what is it about these groups? Now, this is back in 2017, 2018. What I learned very quickly is that these groups were very wild. Like, there was no commonality between the two. There's no rules. One company in the same industry across the street from the other might have and might not, completely different. Even within a company, the women's groups were different than, say, the Asian groups and so forth. And I kept saying, like, I don't understand. Like, this is weird. This is interesting to me. Dug a little bit more because, again, maybe I'm just of a curious entrepreneurial streak, and realized that there was an opportunity. Didn't know if there was money in it, but I knew it was a good target market for my confidence work, which is how I convinced myself and my husband to open a second business, because I never would tell anyone to run two businesses. It's very hard. But I was like, I need a niche. I need a market that I can own. And so I started to go really deep into that market and wound up starting the ERG Leadership Alliance. This was in 2019, its official start. We're now a very large organization. We have 25,000 members, growing like incredibly. Like, it's not even a hockey stick. I don't know what to call it anymore. And most importantly for me, it's a way for me to live out my mission, which is to bring more confidence to the world, particularly with people that I really enjoy, which are, the groups and the, as they call them, I hate this word, underserved populations. So it makes me extraordinarily happy. They love the content. They appreciate the content. And what I can do now is not just train them on the confidence work, but we train them on the business and marketing skills needed to run these groups.
Got it. So I'm sorry if I missed this somewhere. So one of the problems you said you faced was, messaging, because you didn't want to be that person who would be useful for anyone and everyone, but at the same time, you can't niche down a lot also, because then it becomes too focused. And that's where, you said you started ERG. Is that correct? Am I right? ERG is the result of this problem.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that there was an opportunity in that space. Like, I knew they needed help. That was a given. How to make money and all that was kind of secondary. I just knew that they needed help. And I knew that they were very receptive to the confidence work. So again, I used it not so much as it was an excuse. I remember I had the conversation with my husband. I said, I'm going to start another business. He says, no, you're not. He's like, one is enough. I'm like, I know, but I'm having this issue with my primary business, is that it's not niche enough. It's not targeted enough. Here's a target market, a big target market that I really happen to like and I think is a really good fit. And I'm going to dig into that, but I have to have it as a separate identifier. Otherwise it will get lost in the mess of confidence, right? So that's why we started it was my justification, but it was a combination of both seeing an opportunity. What I didn't anticipate, Jag, quite frankly, and in hindsight, it's a terrible thing, but, I started this as a target market, as a labor of love, is, working with people I love. Again, I'm older than you are. And at this point in my life, I want to work with people I like. That's, that's just my rule of thumb. So all those reasons was a good justification. And then we go into COVID, we have Black Lives Matters, Asian hate. We've got all these other things that happen, and it escalated the need for these groups. So my timing was very lucky. And we are not only the only ones that do that training in the world, but we do it really well, because now we have mass and volume that, I can pull best practices out of Amazon, Intuit, Accenture. We have partners in Europe and in Asia and everywhere else that, we learn from each other. We built a huge, wonderful community. And so we literally as a community, as a global community, are forging this together. So I just get to be the benefactor of leading it. But it was just really good timing in that regard.
Got it, Alyssa. Just one, question, just for the clarity of our listeners, those who are not aware of what exactly ERGs are, and if you can go a little bit deeper, just to say, just enough for them to know, okay, how is it a niche in itself?
So this one's much easier than the confidence definition, thankfully. But we define ERG, Employee Resource Group, is one of the it's like kind of the mother term that people use, but there's lots of other names for these things, first of all. So affinity groups, business resource groups, networks, inclusion groups, there's all kinds of names. And, in my last book, and I'll flash that one because we need a visual at this point, we list about 25 different names. The definition is that they are internal associations that are organizationally supported, but employee led. All right. So let's break that down a little bit. Associations, if you've ever belonged to an association, an automobile association, a parent teacher association, you understand that most of the time those people are volunteer leaders. They have a common interest, right? And again, it doesn't have to be an ethnic interest. It can be, a hobby interest. It can be that they're neurodiverse. It could be that they're young, right? There's all different, again, in the book, we label all these different types of groups we see, but they come together. The difference between an employee group of any of those variant titles and a club, which also exists in a lot of these organizations, is that employee groups have funding from the mothership, the organization they're part of. They are governed. So there's rules and policies that say, if you're going to get the funding, these are the things you need to do, whether it's report these kinds of metrics or have this kind of structure, all the governance, and they're accountable. So they do have to report back the impact they're having on the business as well as the diversity initiatives. They don't just exist for employee experience. They exist because they have objectives and because they are proven ways to have higher employee retention. They attract diverse talent, all the things that we know from a kind of talent management perspective. Yeah. But they should have very specific reasons that they support the DEI and business objectives, which is why the businesses want to fund them. Product wise, they can bring great product ideas. They can bring tremendous support to communities that are getting served. So there are real business reasons why they exist. But overall, keep in mind that they are largely volunteer run by employees who have jobs that they were hired to do elsewhere, right? So the thing I love about this particular market, it's full of paradox. It's endless paradox in this market, and intellectually very interesting. But again, going back to the reason I started, for me, these are the people that I feel I can not only serve best, but are the most enjoyable to work with.
Got it, Alyssa. When you said at your age you want to work with people you like, I know what you mean. These days people don't wait.
But yeah, it's a good criteria. Like, I don't like you, I don't want to work with you, right?
Fresh graduates today talk on these lines sometimes today. So I think people are starting to really hit the ground running along the lines of, okay, you know what, first thing, I want to work with people I like. Because there's so much of information today. People know what to expect when you go to work. They know what are red flags, what are good things, what are positive atmospheres and all that. So yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the proof, Jag. The reason that employee groups are so in right now is when people are looking at organizations, they're not going to just read the website PR stuff. They're not going to talk to the hiring manager. They want to talk to the employee groups. They want to talk to people that look like them, that sound like them, and say, is this a good place to work? Do people like you do well here? Like, they want to know the truth, right? So again, maybe it's part of my justice streak, but I feel like, this is where the real truth lives, is in these employee groups, and they're bringing the truth through the organization out. I mean, come on, what better mission to support them could there be?
Yeah. Just another question. So about the, surrounding ERGs. So they need confidence coaching from a point of view that, when they go and pitch things to their mothership, that's where you come in. Is that the main thing?
Well, running a group like that might sound easy to an entrepreneur like yourself, but if you are an accountant and you've always been an accountant, or you're a young new person in the business world, you don't know how to run a group like that. So we teach them how to run the group.
Right.
In a lot of ways, it's like a mini MBA for ERG leaders. That's what we teach them. We teach them everything from how to, develop a charter statement so that you can pitch, to how do you pitch, how much is too much, where do you pitch, as well as how do you set programming. Like, a little bit of the product management part of me coming out is, how do you decide what programming to do? Because your members and everybody's going to tell you they want different things. So how do you prioritize that? How do you communicate what your group is doing? How do you measure it? And what are the proper ways? So the whole 9 years of how to manage it, that's part of it. The confidence coaching is just kind of like an additional professional development in that sense. But we actually even train the executive sponsor. So we have C-suite level people who their careers have been built on being maybe phenomenal in the manufacturing skill set or whatever, or accounting or whatever they've been doing their whole life, the CFO, right? But they've never been taught how to mentor and coach. So that's their role in an executive sponsor role, and they don't know how to do it. So we train them how to do that as well. Now, there is confidence strings in all these things, right? But again, flavored in a way that says you have a job to do relative to these employee groups, which are different than all your hired jobs. And we're going to teach you how to do them. So a lot of the research, a lot of the kind of just the aggregation and the way that we look at the market is, I say there's no such thing as a best practice. Case studies don't help in this space because what works at Amazon's not going to work at, a nonprofit. Like we just train Goodwill. Like it's a different environment, different scope, different style, different culture, but you can understand what across the board are some of the things that people are doing and how they're doing it to build your program. And that's kind of the value that we bring in.
Awesome. Alyssa, when you started the American Confidence Institute, it's pretty straightforward title, American Confidence. You're going to help people with their confidence. Now, when you started off, did you know already that, what you're going to do is going to include something as big as an MBA module, or did it evolve over time? If it did, what's the evolution like? How did you add so many facets and layers to your confidence as the base?
Well, the real answer, Jack, is I screwed up a lot, right? I tried a lot of things. And I want to be clear so Lynette, I mentioned her name again, she was in Canada, and we were smart enough at the time to know that confidence wasn't the same in the way it manifests. It's the same in everyone's head, but it's not the same in the way it manifests in different cultures. So we're like, it's American as in like North American, South American in some cases. But for example, I know you have a large population of listeners in India. It's different, right? Now, the interesting thing is a lot of people who work with Americans or work in America want to know what makes American confidence. So that is our market, but I don't go and teach Indian confidence because it's different, right? That was very part of our strategy was like, let's focus in on that. That much we knew. We also knew that it was a leadership trait that not only was so important, my perspective, and I've said this in some of my TED Talks, is this is the secret. If you understand how confidence works and you practice and you really are aware about confidence, and I don't mean that like general self-awareness, but again, understanding a little bit how you think and what you do with those thoughts, everything else follows. Executive presence follows, and your decision-making is better, your well-being is better, your impact on other people, the way you walk into a room and all of a sudden people turn their heads. So you might call that executive sponsor, but if you're in a bar and you're confident, they still turn their heads. They don't know if you're an executive or not, right? So all of that is traced back. I was with somebody yesterday, as a matter of fact, it was really interesting. And he says to me, I just never been confident my whole life. Oh, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because I think the law of attraction and everything else that follows that, you miss out on that opportunity. So if I can teach people earlier, not till they're 60, but earlier, I fundamentally know, not believe, but know they will be happier. They will be more satisfied. They will accomplish more. They're going to be more productive. So one of the things I knew right off the bat was there wasn't a bad end game of this. I just had to figure out how to get there. So we did try a lot of things, a lot of different product packaging, a lot of different messaging. We still do. There isn't a month that goes by that my marketing team and I start questioning, is that really the right word? Or is that really the right offering? We did, we had a whole thing on self-coaching. I thought, oh, brilliant, right? Self-coaching. A lot of people don't want to hire a coach. Let's teach people how to self-coach. Nobody wants to self-coach. Sounded great. We did a lot of work on it. About 6 months ago, one of the coaches that came through our program as well called me up. She said, everyone's being laid off. Let's do a program that we can really help people regain their confidence after being laid off. I said, well, that's a no-brainer. Nobody signed up. So even with experience, knowledge, even data, sometimes you're going to screw up, but that's part of that fail fast mentality and put stuff out there. I don't say put garbage out there, but if your intuition, if you really believe something is good, you got to try it, but recognize sometimes even the best ideas don't work.
Right. Alyssa, because, you started off by answering this question saying that you... Oh, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
You're back.
I was always hearing you, so I was a little surprised. I think...
I was going to start singing, so you're very lucky you came back.
Okay, great. So, Alyssa, you started off that previous question's answer by saying that you screwed up a lot. And one of my favorite topics to talk to on this show is, people's screw ups and what they, got out of it. Because a lot of the aspiring entrepreneurs, I think personally, I feel this is one of the most valuable sections of the podcast. So if you can, walk through maybe one or two screw ups that kind of, help you learn something very significant, and it kind of took you in the right direction from there on. Anything.
Yeah, well, I just gave you a couple examples of recent, top of the mind. But, I think, here's one of the paradox. I love the word paradox itself, but in the entrepreneurial space, like to be an entrepreneur, you got to have confidence, right? You are facing a lot of naysaying. And I think I know, I do a lot of coaching with entrepreneurs, but one of the things that I also do, I mentioned I do some pitch coaching, a lot of pitch coaching with people from MIT and from the Wharton School of Business, really smart people. And I'll tell you, oftentimes they're staff, they're not students. They are professors. They are the head of neurology for the Olympic training centers. These are serious people. And I joke with them because it's sometimes the smarter you are, the less confident you are, right? And when we teach people to pitch, I have to really break down that barrier of, your business, your technology, your product, whatever it is, really well. And I'm not doubting that. But understanding what's going in other people's heads, and the fact that you're asking them to give you money or do something, buy your product, like you're asking them to do something that they're not excited to do off the bat, right? So you have to really change your mindset. And I think, that was a lesson I learned over and over and over again. It was like, hey, I have something really cool here. And people were like, yeah, no thanks, right? More times than I can tell you, when I would put something out there for a pitch, a TED Talk. All right, so here's I'll answer your question very concretely. I've done 2 TED Talks. I have applied to probably 150. Right? Now, people don't realize that. They think, everyone can just apply and go do a TED Talk. It is not. And when I don't get them, I am very aggressive about finding out why. I had my last one. And after that, I said, you know what? I'm done. I've done my TED Talks. I don't need to do anymore. I like doing them. That's why I apply, because they're fun. I don't need it for my resume. I'm a TED Talker. I'm done, right? I've done 2. That's one more than I needed to do. But the last one, they actually asked me to apply. They said, we really want you to be part of this group, but we need you to do the application because it's just part of the process and blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. And they got a note back and they said, no, thank you. And I was angry, Jack. I was really angry because they wasted my time and it was insulting. So I went like a mad woman and I went, I want to know why. Now, here's where I think the lesson is. People don't want to tell you why, unless it's an easy excuse. Somebody overruled my decision. We don't have budget. At the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, you're going to get a lot of no's. And oftentimes it has nothing to do with you. And you got to remember that. But you often will not be told that. So you have to just kind of assume that. And I think in my career, I have lost so much energy, been so angry at times, been maybe not so great to people in that. And that was one that just stands out as a lesson that, like, you're not going to win them all. And maybe even something like that where you're like, it's a shoo-in. I had a deal last week that fell through. It was a $30,000. Actually, this week, it's only Thursday, right? I had a deal that fell through. That was, they were, I was like, I haven't received the contract. What's up? They're like, oh, we changed our mind, right? We were literally at the finish line. And I look back and I go, okay, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have been very angry, very aggressive with them. And it's not energy that's well spent. So that's a good example. I think I probably ate up my time for my second, but if you want, I can dig another one.
No, thank you. I mean, when you just said to get those 2 TED Talks, you did 150 applications. Wow, I think there's nothing
I'm
more.
guessing, but like, yeah, hundreds, like,
No, I get it. Yeah, even if it is
yeah.
50 or 70 or 80, it's still a huge thing. So, people get an idea as to what is the. So, I've been in sales. I started my career in sales pretty late, when I was 27 or something. And one of the perspectives I wanted was all the rejections that you face as a sales guy is only better because it's not going to be rejections. There is going to be one S amidst, in the middle of all those rejections. So the more the rejections, the more hopeful you
The
need to be.
closer, right?
Okay, the yes is got a little closer. And I'm so glad you mentioned you had to apply so many times to get 2, because, I don't know how many people would be candid enough to go out and say that, because it might look, oh, you were so desperate to apply so many times to get 2. No. That's what you got to do to get something.
Right.
That's how many
Well,
hits you got to
and I
take.
love your example. My brother-in-law taught me that too. He's a sales guy as well. And it makes me very happy. And somebody says no, like, get me there faster because I want to find a yes, right? But here's
Yeah.
the difference in some cases, Jag, and like selling somebody else's product, right? You get it rejected, it's annoying. You want to get your quota and all that. When somebody says no to you, and I use the TED Talk as a specific, right? And you can't help. Now you're an entrepreneur. It's your baby. It's your product, whatever it is, right? Somebody says no
Yeah.
to that. It's still a personal no. And I think separating it could be 1,000,002, reasons why they go to no. Don't assume it's about you. And realize there's 1,000,000 other opportunities out there. That's a hard leap, but that goes back to our original conversation. It's that fear thing. They don't like me. I'm failing. My amygdala is on fire. And either I can go into my brainstem and become an aggressive, crazy person. Why didn't you hire me? What, right? Which is what I would do before. These
Right.
days, because I understand a lot more about the world in my brain, I'm like, you know what? Let me go find the yes. So, you made that's a confident decision. That's a great example.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you so much for sharing this. Alyssa, just going back to a previous topic, you said when your first company was not targeted enough, you're facing a little problem. That's how ERG came about. But have you solved that problem, or is ERG your bigger baby now?
Well, the ERG work is definitely a bigger baby in terms of, revenue and activity, but I pull through all the
Right.
confidence work. So I still do confident workshops. I just now have a market that is really, it's a beautiful market, targeted and loves my work. And they know me because of the work I've done. So it's a blend. The Institute still stands. We still do a lot of work on its own. We still do L'Oreal. I'm
Right.
also a spokesperson for American Distilling Institute. So there's plenty of work to be done and revenue that comes in through that channel on its own. But there is a beautiful opportunity to kind of leverage that content through the ELA. Yeah.
Great. You said something, you get, a lot of people recognize you because of all the work that you've done. Because this was like part of my question set, that I ask everybody. Today, you have so much behind you, you've built so much. It's different today. But when you started off, how did you go about building that? What was the first step? What were the misses? What were the hits? If you have to say, so, tell somebody who's going to start now, or who started 6 months back, what do you
Well,
have to say?
so we were joking before. We're trying to come up with visuals. I grabbed all the books because the only thing I could think of. So this book was my first book, Software Product Management Essentials. It couldn't be anything more different than what I write now, right? And at the time, it was like nobody told me I couldn't write a book, so why not, right? Like it just was kind of blind naivete, and this is an old book. I think 2009 was the first edition, but at the time Amazon was just coming on board, so I have a screenshot where this says this is a bestseller because
Wow.
it was like one of 10 books on Amazon. It was awesome, right?
Right.
I think sometimes, and books are a great example. Every day somebody's like, I wish I could write a book. I'm like, well, who told you couldn't? Like, just do it, right? Like, it's that, who cares? I think that's part of it. I think that there was this, I'm working in corporate, I'm doing good work. I kept saying to my manager, who's still my friend today, we joke about this. I'm like, yeah, marketing's interesting, it's good work, but it's not really, it doesn't light me up, right? And following a path of things that seem to be of interest to me and being brave enough to be like, you know what, if it's interesting and I feel good about it and it aligns with my values, I'm going to show up in the world better. And so the opportunities started showing up. My husband and I, every night at dinner, he says to me, tell me about the divine interventions that happened today. And it's kind of like a joke because things line up for me like nobody's business. And I'll tell you why, Jag. It's because I follow what's true to me and what's really important to me. So when the doors open, they're very obvious to me. I think what happens with a lot of people is they get into a career or a job and they're just doing the thing. They're, every day there used to be a Dunkin' Donuts ad here in the US. It was like, we get up and make the donuts every day, like make the donuts, right? And so what happens is you have opportunity pathways. You have people that show up in your life, but they go right past you. You don't pay attention because you're not focused on what's really important. And when you are focused, like I became in that pivot moment where I said, you know what, I got to help my son, and subsequently recognized that the confidence work was something that really was aligned with who I wanted to be. Everything changed. And I can't promise you that the money will follow. Sometimes people say that, do what you love and the money will follow. So that's not always the case. It's not. I'd be lying to people. But if that's really where you want to be, you take that kind of staggered approach where you say, all right, I'm going to make the donuts for a while, but in the 3 years, I'm going to start to shift my priority, my time, and subsequently my revenue. And you have a much better chance if you're really deliberate about it. And I think that made the difference for me is I knew what I wanted to do, but I was practical and very strategic about getting there.
Thank you, Alyssa. I mean, I think you said something very fundamental, very deep. I think you just follow that, everything's just going to flow. So you don't have to like really do whatever you do in that mind state is going to work. Where, you're true to yourself about what you want to do.
Yeah, but be practical, right? I also have to make money, right? Like that's not just a necessity, but it makes me feel good too. So I had to really figure that out and give myself enough runway. So it wasn't like I quit my corporate job all of a sudden to do a Confidence Institute. I figured out a way to, kind of ease into it. And I think people have to be realistic with, not only, as we said earlier, you have a great idea. Maybe it's great to you, but you're not your customer. Your friends and your family are maybe likely not your customers either. So you need to give yourself time, and that time takes money to really test and figure things out and screw up enough that you at least find some traction so that you can take the next step, right? It's not an instant thing. And I think in this world where instant gratification, fail fast and move on and agile, and we tell people, just keep moving. That's not always the secret to entrepreneurial success when you dig into it. And you probably know from interviewing all the people that you've interviewed, right?
Yeah.
No overnight successes. It's not really the way it works.
One thing common, in the pre-podcast call, we were talking about how I was just saying, no matter how similar the work that people seem to do, but none of the stories that I found was, it's got the same thing. But one thing that was same was it was not overnight thing. Everybody's got like 10 years, 15 years of struggle and history and, so many events that kind of shaped. And it's like one roller coaster ride. It's just not one straight line or, something uniform.
True.
Alyssa, I was just going through your website, right? As I near the podcast time, I'm like, you know what? Okay, let me just see if I can pick something. It's a thing. It's like one habit. If I don't do that, it's like, oh, I haven't done something today. And when I went to your website, I saw this title for an episode of your podcast, which said, self-awareness is overrated. Am I Correct? I'm not wrong, right? I mean, as like, wait, let me just check with Alyssa what she means by this. Can you? Because I've heard so many great people of who've achieved a lot of things talk about be self-aware, 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 and here you say self-aware is overrated.
Well, I won't take too much away from the pod because it's a really good podcast. Just saying, and it caught your attention, right? So here's part of the marketer in me. You have to have a catchy title on a podcast to get them to open up the podcast, right? And one woman wrote right away, we launched it, I got an email, and she said, "Are you kidding?" And I said, "Did you read the rest of the paragraph?" Because what the description of the podcast basically says is what happens with self-awareness is everyone gets indoctrinated. We have to be self-aware. So everyone goes out and takes some assessment. Assessments are often not scientific. They're only one perspective. And then we get put into a box and we use it as a justification for the way we behave. Well, that's just the way I am, an LBQTYZ. That's the way I am. Too bad for you. So does that make somebody more self-aware? No, because the impact they're having on the rest of the world doesn't come from a single assessment. The awareness of what's important to you, what you want to be, who you want to become. And there's a big split, I guess, in the pedagogy as far as assessments, that some of them believe you are who you are, you can't change, that's the way you'll always be. And that's actually in the majority of them. And I don't subscribe to that. I think if you want to be the kind of person, the kind of legacy you want to leave, that's completely in our control. It doesn't almost matter where you've come from, what your background is in many cases. You can change who you are as a person. Can't say that you might, all of a sudden fall and win the lottery, but you can certainly change the way you react and respond to the world, right? With that said, there's not a single assessment. There's not a single person or coach, right? This is part of your life experience and how you process and how you think and the way that you make your decisions about how you're going to process that. That comment about your sales thing, the same one that my brother-in-law said, he says, there's 1 in 10 win. So to get the 9 out of the way fast, right? That way of thinking makes a big statement about who you are and your attitude, right? And when we make those choices, when we are deliberate about those choices, an assessment's not going to tell you any of that. It's actually going to prevent you from making choices because it's going to say, here's your box, Jag, stay in this box. You're this kind of a person. That's it. So that's what that podcast talks about. It also talks about the fact that self-assessment is only half of it. Right? Yeah. Because I have a little pet peeve too about, be a badass, that kind of attitude. Like, what about everybody else around me? Like, if I'm a badass, they're going to be badass. I don't want to be around badasses, right? I want to be around people who are simpatico, who are compassionate, because that's what I value. So understanding your impact on the rest of the world, that's the other piece of it. And some assessments do a little bit of that, but at the same time, self-awareness, that's the phrase I used. Yeah. I think we give it a little too much credibility in the way that we do it. So listen to the podcast and you'll see a lot more or hear a lot more.
This is such a beautiful section, it is a mini masterclass into how to make your marketing still clickbaity, but you leave some element of truth in it. And it was beautiful how there was a mix of both. So can't fault you at all. So there is a little bit of truth to it. Alyssa, there's all the topics that I was thinking, and just one topic that we've spoken about, but I'd just like to touch upon this one more time because I think this is very important, and if you can just help us get it reinforced. You said confidence is a choice. It's not a feeling. It's a choice. It's a conscious thing that you do. And I also happen to realize over this conversation that it doesn't happen overnight. You just can't find yourself not confident and suddenly figure out something and be confident. It's a practice that you have to incorporate every single day. Is there any simple practice that people can do on a daily basis to kind of gradually become confident about anything that they do? It's not about right or wrong, but are you confident doing what it is? Now that I know what confident means, I think it's important for everybody to be confident.
Yeah, well, I mentioned before recognizing that itchy feeling, right? Whatever that feeling is for you, where you're feeling like a little uncomfortable, of course, that's kind of like the fundamental thing. I'm going to give you, there's a couple tips that we teach in our courses, in our books, but it's a simple one and it's another visual. So why not? Right on my desk, I have something, it's a piece of wood, it says
Right.
confidence. This is what's called a structure. And I don't mean this specific thing, but anything in your life, a picture, a song, somebody sent you an email, a LinkedIn testimonial, anything that you read and you go, yeah, I don't suck. Or, you know what, I can get through this. In the psychological world, they call it a structure. And what it does in your brain is it reminds you, A, you've been here before and you survived and you're fine. So it's a way of kind of getting past that moment of self-doubt, right? But it can be really a reminder that there's a greater good, right? So I lost the deal, but you know what? Last time I looked at this, I won a really big one, or whatever the association is. Somebody thought enough to give this to me. That makes me really happy, right? So find a structure, find something, a rabbit's foot for whatever, anything that you go, this makes me happy and lucky. I tell people, if you really want to amp it up, start what I call a confidence collection. Put a folder, Google folder or Dropbox folder, wherever you have your stuff, and start collecting those things. When I go on stage, I go and I start reading that. And I remember all these people who really got value for something I did for them, usually a speech or something. And I go, I'm good at this. I can do this. Right.
Right.
And the reality is that in all those speeches and all those times that I was coaching, I probably screwed up, and I probably remember almost with humor, remember that's the time I did. Right? And they still wrote a beautiful thing, and I'm still going to go out and create some love in the world. So a structure is so powerful, but so simple that everyone should have at least one, and if not, a whole collection of them.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really actionable. And so is overconfident, the word overconfident, technically wrong?
No, it's not, and there's a lot of what we call confidence cousins, and they're related constructs like self-efficacy and courage, right? It's courage, you have to be, and they're different. The one that everyone always comes back is, cocky, overconfident. Is that confident? And the answer is, of course not, right? Somebody who's cocky, somebody who's overconfident, they're different. And overconfident means that they have they think they can do something. They have a belief that they can do something without the evidence, right? And I'll give you an example. Somebody who comes to you and says, "Oh yeah, no, I can do a podcast, no problem." They've never done one, and you're like, "Oh, they don't know what all the moving part." Right? You're thinking to yourself, "That person," but they're overconfident because they don't know. They don't have the information, right? Cocky is different, or arrogant is different, because the arrogant person knows damn well they don't know how to do it. But they're going to fake you out to make you believe that they think they can do it. I've never done a podcast, but I can do it. Right? So there is a difference. There's a fundamental difference. Overconfident, you have to feel a little sorry for it because they just don't know. They're a little ignorant, right? And it's dangerous because they can be overconfident on things that they really shouldn't do. A cocky person actually knows they really can't, but they're trying to fake you out to make you believe that they can.
Great. Thank you. Alyssa, this is one probably final moving part of any business today, maybe the boring aspect of it. The tech part that, connects a lot of things today. I was visiting your website and I saw that you use one of the platforms to host your courses and stuff like that. Now, what I'm interested in, as a person who's out there sharing your knowledge, how do you look at your tech problems? If you can let me in your mind, okay, these are the words that I think of. These are the everyday little problems that I face. And and if you can walk us a little bit about what are the tech parts that kind of make you wholesome, make you whole when it comes to the tech thing.
Well, for those of you who aren't watching visually, I made a whole series of faces similar to if somebody were poking my eyes out with needles. My background, I started in tech, but full confession, before the PC was invented, literally. So I have a long history with tech, a love-hate relationship. I'm also a marketer, right? So I love beautiful things, and I like precision and messaging and colors and things. And so over the years, I have learned, and this goes back to even confidence, believe it or not, this idea of enough, right? Of, within the confines, there's going to be maybe 10% that standard deviation of it's not perfect, but it's good enough, right? So when I look at technology, I know there's always a better platform, right? There's always going to be a better solution, a cheaper, faster, whatever. But as an entrepreneur, when you got to move really fast, you have very limited resource, very limited time. You find what's good enough at that point. We created we needed a CRM a couple of years ago when we started ELA. And my entire team at the time was all marketing people, and they knew a particular piece of technology. I don't want to name names, but it was very prevalent in the marketing space. And one of them said, we can use it for CRM. We just have to tweak it a little and it's good. And I thought, you know what, the adoption curve for my team, the cost was in line. It was fine. We hit such a wall with it this year because of the scope, and I can't get good reporting and all this. And they're like, so now we're like going and we're looking at CRMs, right? Again, we can go full boat and get some good big ones and think, well, 3 years down the road, we're going to need it, versus what can I get on now faster, in the budget.
Right.
So we're always looking at that enough equation. At the same time, I wouldn't lie to you, Jag. I would say if I had a magic wand and I could have somebody in my team right now who was, could take that problem away from me and just make all the technology decisions, test it all. We got an email issue. We've got, we've got data. It's the typical thing where you grow and you're so fast, and then all of a sudden everything's technology is like, wow. I will say though, the platform decision we made was done under fire. And it worked out to be one of the greatest blessings. And I'll tell you what, this is kind of a funny story in hindsight, but I had hired a company to help with our video marketing. This is many years ago now. And they overpromised what they could do and wound up blowing up our website, literally blowing it up, where I called our hosting provider. They couldn't even roll it back to where it had been. So I had lost like 10 years of development. And it was one of those moments where I literally was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And so, wallowed in that for about 24 hours and said, I remember I was sitting in my desk on a weekend and I'm like, I'm just going to rebuild this thing myself. And went out and asked some people and looked online and came back and I said, I'm going to play with this free trial, built the thing. And next thing I knew, I was like, yeah, I think we can do it on this. Subsequently, we built the whole business. Both businesses run on that. And it, is it the best platform out there? I don't know, but it really works well for us. So, sometimes it happens by accident and sometimes it happens again. Maybe that was the reality of, it's time to move on anyway. And it's worked out really well. But, even if you're technical, or maybe specifically for people who are technical, I'm going to encourage you to not strive for perfection and waste time in that pursuit, but look for something that's good enough. You can change and transfer and transition later, sometimes more painful than others, but otherwise you spend an enormous amount of time playing with toys. And at the end of the day, you got to run your business.
Got it, Alyssa. After all that, if you have to, list top 3 tech problems that you wish would go away, and then, it would help your business so much, what do you have such problems?
Oh gosh, and all of a sudden I'm going to get all these emails and calls. I have a feeling, because everyone's going to be like, I can help you, which might be good, but I don't know. We'll see. Email, it's a big one. Deliverability of email and just managing that better would be top of my list right now. It's been out there for a long time. Very hard to find somebody who really understands email conceptually. They understand an email package, but they don't understand email, and we're just having all kinds of problems. We run on a couple different systems. So that would be number one. I would say right now, I said CRM, we're in the middle of that kind of a decision point. And so it would be nice to have somebody who really understood what's out there, save me some time to explain it at the strategic level. Features I can figure out. It's just more like, what is this? Does it really work? And if so, how do we get it to work really well for us? So that would be number 2. Number 3, can you invent something that comes out of my computer and gives me a back rub every now and then? No, but wonderful. No, honestly, I think part of it is the organization of data, and we have Google Drive stuff and Dropbox stuff and our own, that's all of that. And I know in a lot of the work that I've done in the past, everyone's always trying to solve that problem, but it's still not solvable, where all of a sudden I'm like, I need to find this contract, or I need to find notes on this client. And it's like, it takes 10 minutes to find where it's at. because you can't just search one place, you have to search 5. So
Right.
that would be a nice problem to solve. So if anyone's out there and has a solution for any of those, call me.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa, for that. Alyssa, it's been a amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing whatever you did. A lot of things very candidly, and a lot of things very honestly. And this is I never heard of this concept before. The outcomes are same, but the way you approach them, putting it the way you put it is like very different. I'm gonna try a few things myself, and I'm gonna look at that overconfident. Part of the reason I asked was growing up, I was always termed overconfident by my teachers. That's where I was,
Now you know
asking
why.
you. I don't know why. Yeah. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I wish I'm gonna, do some more research, and I'm sure there's so much we can talk about. But I'm gonna come back to you maybe 3 months down the line, asking you for a part 2. Let's see how that goes.
That's great, Jag.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks for what you do. Entrepreneurship can be very lonely, very scary. So anything we can do to help people feel empowered and confident. I dub you a confidence crusader as well, and I appreciate you doing that.
It's a pleasure. I wish you all the very best. And you said, a $30,000 deal kind of fell through this week. And I hope, you find that
there'll
very
be a
soon.
$50,000 deal before the end of the week. I
Yeah.
promise you on that. So, it's
Yeah.
fell off. There's more that comes, but that's a
Yeah.
hindsight that, again, my younger self probably would have freaked out. And at this point in my life, I'm just like, okay, where's the next deal? Let's go. Come on.
Same effort, more money, maybe.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Alyssa.